Prajna, welcome back to the Earth Mystery Show. It's so nice to have you here again.
Yes, thank you, Haines. Thanks for having me.
And Prajna's here because I like to have her on the show, but also because she's written a book called Edge of Grace, A Seeker's Path to the Heart of Liberation. And people all my adult life have said, Haines, you ought to write a book. And I've never had the courage or the energy or the whatever it takes to write a book. And so here, I've known you for, 10 years maybe, and you've written a book. So,
yeah.
And your life is a lot busier than mine. So what brought you to the Edge of Grace to write a book?
Well, as you know, I've been working on it for 7 years. I rewrote it 3 different times and had a few interruptions along the way. And if you read the book, you'll understand why that is, because of the busy life. But what brought me to write it, well, in the writing of it was very much like a therapeutic process for me. And I think everybody, like you said, has a book in them. And that writing our story and putting our voice on paper is such an incredible process for healing and for finding your truth, for just clarity. And for me, I did it so that I could really move beyond a difficult situation and find the light and beauty in it. And I actually found much more.
I bet. When I was reading it, I said to my wife this morning, I said, I was an English major in college, and every teacher would say at the very beginning of the course, I don't think there was even a teaching assistant that didn't say, now when you're writing, think of who you're writing for. Who's the audience? Who's listening to what you're writing? And so I used to write papers directed at the professor who asked me to write, and I would write completely different voices or completely different styles based on the professor I was writing to. Who is this book written to?
Yeah. Well, the first time that I wrote it more like a novel, so that I could actually be a character in the book. Mm-hmm. And that allowed me, first of all, to fill out the characters, to really be each one. So first I became the characters, and then I became the audience for the second round. And the audience is is everybody, because there isn't anyone that I know that doesn't come to an edge at one time in their life. Where, we have our tragedies, we have our difficulties, we have our challenges. And this is for all of the people that either are on a spiritual journey or not, or maybe a difficulty brings them to that because they want to come out of suffering and they want to see the light at the end of the tunnel. So that's my audience. It's quite grand. There isn't anyone who can't benefit from it. I thought at first it would be mostly for women, but men actually seem to really love it. And I have families that are sharing the book. I had one mother send me an email and she said, I'm loving this book. It's reading like a mystery thriller. And my son keeps taking it from me, so we're going back and forth to see who's going to get to read it next. Mm-hmm. So it's really working for so many people.
Of your book, I actually like the beginning, and I like the end the best.
Uh-huh. Why is that?
Well, the beginning, though, is like kind of you're setting out your intention, or you're giving up secrets, and how this whole thing affected you, and you sort of came from the mountaintop of samadhi to all of a sudden the shock of in a few chapters of life and the children, and then at the end we'll actually read some of that, or you read some of the epilogue if you don't mind at the end of the show.
Okay.
But for those of you who don't know Prajna, she has 2 disabled kids, and her first kid came along, and then 2 years later Abby and Libby came along, and they've been in your life ever since I've known you. And I've been amazed and just sort of in awe watching how you raise these children. And when I asked you who's the book for, I thought, if I was you, I would send this book either electronically or in person to every school for disabled children in the country, because it's sort of this can be done. Mm-hmm. And your kids are, I'd say, more severely disabled than many people's that are in these schools. Like you were saying, when you came to Colfax, and you wanted to enroll your kids in a school, the guy said, come back when they can walk. Mm-hmm. And many kids can walk just fine. They don't have any trouble enrolling in a school for kids with disabilities, because they're minimally disabled. And your kids were maximally disabled.
Yeah.
And yet you were able to raise them and and do so much for them. One of the things I was thinking on the way up here is in one of the chapters you were talking about having all these neurological stimulation things in your living room. And when my dog, who's under the table right now, was a puppy, I read that dogs need stimulation to be intelligent. If you leave them in the yard or the house and they don't get stimulation, they're not bright dogs. And when I read that, I thought, just driving around in the car, the simple pleasures, your nose out the window, all the new smells, just the bumping of the car gives vestibular stimulation.
Yes.
Just the movement and of taking the dog everywhere I went. So this dog has gone to work with me, has gone everywhere I go, because I read that vestibular stimulation, neurological stimulation is crucial for intelligence and for the dog to be intelligent. And so here you had these kids, and you actually went into getting things to give them neurological stimulation constantly to make their brains grow.
Yes, yes. And there's the story in there about Abby, which many people in this community know my daughter Abby, and they know Libby too. They see us in the community. But Abby did become a walker when she was age 6, and there is the story in there about how she learned to walk, and she did all the creeping and crawling, and we built a walking track for her. And then how one day I turn around and she's climbing the stairs by herself, holding the railing. And also how she was completely blind, and she began to see, and she starts to see flowers in the garden, and things like that were just not expected by anybody. And she's gone off the charts, so she's in this community. She's been part of the dance community, Aerial Silks, and now she's at Body Balance Kung Fu. She's been part of Bikram Yoga. She's just unstoppable.
And I do think part of that is your fault.
My fault.
With the neurological stimulation, the constant attention, it would be so easy to let someone like that go to a home and veg, and they would never have gotten out of a crib. And all of that neurological stimulation and work and love and activity from you is what made her where she is.
And I got very lucky along the way, too, the resources that I sought out and people that I met that gave me information that was contrary to what I was learning from certain medical communities. Like the book, What to Do for Your Brain and Your Child, that, said you could do all these things, and I read that in one night, and I just couldn't wait to get started. And then to find places that support that. So there are resources, and there are little niches where you can find that kind of support. Like the woman that we went to who isn't around anymore, Judith Bluestone, who created Handle, which many people, I think, know about that, especially for people who have autism. It's called Holistic Approaches to Neurological Development and Learning Efficiency.
What a mouthful.
I know. She didn't learn to speak until she was 13. And then she became this amazing worldwide speaker through neurological development. So she created these techniques, and she learned to speak. And so we met her and ended up working with her for quite a couple of years, and then she passed away. But, so there are people out there, and what she says, if somebody says that you can't do it, it means that they just haven't tried, or it hasn't been documented.
Or they weren't successful.
Yeah.
Or were lazy.
Yeah. Well, you need support. It's hard.
Well, maybe this is too personal, but on the cover of the book, you're standing at the cliff. Could you tell us about that experience of going to the cliff with your baby?
Yeah, the cliff, that is actually the first chapter, and I just had a book event at Tomes the other day, and I read that first chapter. So the first chapter, it's called The Cliff, and it's about Libby. When she was born, she needed CPR for 4 hours, and they lost her twice. So she was in a semi-coma for 6 months. And then after, I had her home after 3 months, and she mostly slept, and she nursed lightly. But at 6 months, she woke up, and she woke up crying. And she didn't stop crying, and it went on for 2.5 years. And the only thing that would stop her from crying was constant motion. So I had to rock, or we had a mini trampoline, or I would walk. And I'd rock sometimes through the entire night, just rocking and rocking. So I was getting I mean, my ankle from high-speed rocking, repetitive motion. I mean, I was really in pain, but emotionally, I just was completely spent, totally spent. And it really showed me what it means to be in a dark night. When people are just taken over by a shroud of darkness. And that happened to me, and I was just led out to a cliff and ready to I did jump. I leaned in, but the wind pushed me back and told me to go home. That this was my life, and I needed to get some rest, but it was the life that I was meant to live. So I went home, and I got carried home pretty much. It was quite like a intervention. I feel like something intervened. And then I went back to the rocking chair. I had Libby with me the entire time in my sling. And we fell asleep. And that was the first time I slept for 4 hours straight in 2.5 years.
Right.
And then everything started to shift. But not all at once.
Someone's calling.
Oh, there it is.
Hello, Prajna?
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Michelle, and I'm reading your book now.
Wow.
And I just love it. And I would like to say a quote of yours that really took me away. Try to go slow.
Mm-hmm.
The spiritual awakening is a radical shift in identity from a conditioned perception of yourself as a separate individual to a direct encounter with yourself as spiritual essence. Now, I'm reading it slowly because I'm just trying to absorb everything, and that really means a lot to me. And in my personal situation, I'm wondering, and I'm hoping, do you provide a type of counseling or spiritual assistance for people in the community that are living awake among family life?
Yes, I do. Like Haines mentioned it earlier, I have a Thursday sitting, which is, lots of people come to that and find lots of support. And I do one-on-one sessions. And I really love working with people from families, but I work with all kinds of people. I have a background in Hakomi, which is body-centered psychotherapy. But I also really just like to reflect back to people what they already know, so I'm a deep listener and offer guidance that way to empower the other person to hear their inner guidance. And that quote, that's amazing. It's a good one to sit with and to let yourself just have that shift. We are so conditioned by our culture, our schools, our families, and to kind of live within that limitation doesn't allow us to see what our options are. So as soon as we start to see ourselves as essence and experience ourselves directly as spiritual essence, call it whatever you want, consciousness, freedom, light, all of these things, then we start to see that we have more options and possibilities in life. They continuously open up so that we don't need to step back into old patterns that don't bring us peace, that bring us pain or suffering. So that's a good one.
Thank you so much. I've been watching your videos on YouTube, and there's a lot of amazing videos there. So I thank you so much for being such a treasure to this community.
Oh, thank you, Michelle. Thanks for calling in. I'm looking forward to seeing you in person. Just just contact me through my website.
I will indeed. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thanks
for the call. Appreciate it. So, you went from the mountaintop to having the kids that were such a I don't even know what to say, hard, difficult.
Yes.
And then you mentioned when 9/11 happened. What happened that day?
Yes, and just even, I want to say something about that, but even the mountaintop thing, I think, like why I spell that out in the book so often is because we have this concept or view or idea, perception about spiritual awakening being a mountaintop experience of bliss, and we hope that it will be a continuous state of nirvana. And I actually did have that for a while, what I call the honeymoon phase of awakening. And often people think, well, that if challenge comes or any other kind of feeling that's contrary to that they must have lost it, and they need to seek again. But just like the Buddha said, the Buddha said a lot of amazing things, but one thing he said is that life is suffering. He didn't only say that, but he said life is suffering, and I think what that does is it gives us full permission to include the full range of experience. That there are tragedies, there are difficulties. So he was really, expressing that whole thing about it isn't just the mountaintop, it isn't just nirvana. There isn't really an escape hatchet, that there's real life. So I had to come down the mountain into real life. And that's what my children brought to me, they showed me that I could also live amidst this and take it, a day by day. So then what happened later, 9/11, this is after I had met Adyashanti. I met Adyashanti shortly after the cliff experience, which was another kind of a grace that came. A friend came knocking at my door and wanted to give me a CD of his, and at the time I wasn't really looking for anything, and then after she left I listened to it, and actually what the CD was about, he was talking about dark nights. And I was like, finally, somebody's talking about what I'm going through. And I needed to meet him right away, and I became his student and have been friends ever since. It's been 16 years. And when 9/11 came, I had already had, spiritual awakening has many facets. It's like a jewel. There's every part can feel like it's complete until then you get to another side, another facet of the jewel. But while 9/11, when it came, I was getting out of my van in my driveway, and I felt something huge happen, like it was tremendous that moved through me, and it felt like I knew that something serious had happened. It felt like I was experiencing the trauma that the people in New York were experiencing, even though I was on the other side of the country. And when that happened, it was like a voice inside said to me, go and sit. And I went and I sat, and I started inviting people to come and sit with me. And that was my first time to start to reach out for people to come and sit. And I called it, what the voice said, this is a call to sanity. That there's really some insanity going on in the world, and that what we need to do to remedy it is to sit, and to sit and find out what's sane, to find out to really explore and discover our sanity. And ever since then there's been, not just for me, but there's this huge impulse for people to know the truth and to awaken. And it's just rippling all over.
I was fascinated by your sadness, because that day I was at the top of the mountain. I was just overjoyed with God is in his heaven, and the birds are in the trees, and the flowers are blooming, and everything. Nothing could be more perfect. This world is absolute, unbelievable manifestation of perfection. And I saw Adya, I think the day after, or 2 days after 9/11, he says, well, how did this 9/11 thing affect you? And I just said, it's wonderful. It's just wonderful. So it was interesting that you felt it. You felt the sadness, and I was. It didn't affect me in any way. It just seemed like I was part of the perfection of this universe.
Yeah, and also what I felt, not only just the sadness and the grief of the people, but I felt that I wasn't separate from them. I felt, the totality, that we're really all, connected in a very real way. It's like their grief is my grief. And so it was just the whole other side of awakening, like I had experienced the bliss of it.
I was feeling the bliss of thinking, everything that human beings declare bad isn't bad. Everything is there's a reason, there's a purpose, and it's just none of our business. Why are there so many wars and holocausts and famines and diseases? It's because it's none of our business. It's God's will. There is a purpose. There is a reason. There is a good. Because we don't perceive it doesn't mean it isn't the right thing, just the proper moment to happen.
Yeah, that's like, kind of an absolute view. That's true, it's perfect. And at the same time, it can be it's heartbreaking at the same time. There's that human part that is really touched by it.
Right. I wasn't in that human part those days.
Yeah.
It just didn't matter.
Yeah, and what's good too, though, if you can see the absolute perfection, I think for people that it can also allow for that relief to happen with the difficult, the sadness about it, the grief, the pain, the suffering. That in the total view, there is an okayness, all is well. But at the same time, the human part can hurt.
Indeed, and that's the pendulum. You can go to the human part, and all the suffering. I guess Buddha was at that swing of the pendulum where all of suffering he felt, where he was aware of all suffering, as you mentioned. And then the other swing of the pendulum is it's okay. Mm-hmm. It's all okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There will be illness, old age, death, and sickness, and at the same time, it's all okay.
So I would personally rather stay in that's all okay swing, but the pendulum goes both ways. And I was sick a couple weeks ago, really sick, and I was so thankful when it passed. And I was so aware, the dark night, of how frail the human condition is, and how nothing matters if you're sick. It doesn't matter what's going on, whether you have a job, whether you have a family. If your body's not working, that's the only thing that matters. So that was an experience.
Yeah.
Hi, caller. You're live on the air with Prajna on KVMR.
Hey there. I just wanted to make a comment, and that is as far as sitting in the OK seat, it does kind of come across like, I think you should know when you say that 911 didn't make a difference to you, and why is there the war in the world and it's none of your business. You are sitting in the OK seat, just to remind you of that. And I understand what you're saying, but I don't think that it's necessarily coming across that well. You are a doctor, a white man in Nevada County, sitting in the OK seat. And there's a lot of people out there that I think would, maybe if you sat in a different seat, you might feel differently. Thanks.
I appreciate your comment, and I didn't mean to come across as being Mr. Goody Two-Shoes. I said that was a swing of the pendulum. That's where I was at that moment.
Uh-huh.
And the pendulum swings both ways. And I just mentioned how sick I was and how down I was recently. Mm-hmm. So, and feeling the despair of the body not being working, and feeling very sympathetic toward everybody in this world whose body's not working, and how hard that must be. Whenever I see a person in a wheelchair or with any kind of disability, I think, I'm so fortunate to be back on my feet. That person's not going to get back on their feet. So the pendulum swings both ways, and I hope you can appreciate that I was talking about how I felt in 2011 at that moment. That doesn't mean that's how I feel at this moment. Mm-hmm. And we're talking about how Prajna was at the top of the mountain when she woke up and feeling euphoric, and everything was just great. But she had to come back to the world, had to come back to bringing that into this world with children, and not just children, but children with special needs. It required 24/7. Imagine having a baby that cried for 2.5 years. That wouldn't stop. Whatever your life's like, imagine an infant 6 months old that wouldn't stop crying for 2.5 years. How would you live? How would you do that? That takes some strength, some courage, and to keep a non-dual reality in front of you or with you through that, my hat's off to you.
Yeah. Well, it's a good comment that helps to clarify, exactly what it was that you meant and what we're speaking. So thanks for that comment.
Yeah, we appreciate the calls, and I appreciate the needle pokes in the ribs that I get from listeners for things I say on the air. It's always educational to know how you come, or what people, how they take it. So back to your book, The Edge of Grace, A Seeker's Path to the Heart of Liberation. You were swept back from that cliff by the wind and by some force that took you back into the world, and you persevered in this world to the point where you can write this book and you can counsel others and help others. What do you see as the future?
Oh, I don't think about the future. If I thought about the future, I would just feel exhausted. Because sometimes I can't even think about tomorrow, because I still have these 2 daughters. They're 18. I've been taking care of them for 18 years. And I said this I was talking with my friend Adyashanti the other day, and I said to him, if I actually ever really tried to plan something out, I probably wouldn't do anything, because there are so many variables and so many details. Like in one of the stories in there, I talk about just bringing my daughters to camp, like what was involved in that whole thing to drop them off at camp so me and my oldest daughter could have a vacation for 10 days. And it was just, it was an example of the ordeal. But, so I have, something has developed in me, call it trust, call it just this ability to show up and take a chance. So I don't really plan for the future. I put things on my schedule and I just do it. And sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. But it's kind of like that for me, because my daughter is like, if I were to the future, there's all these different things. I'm supposed to conserve my daughters so that they're 18 now, so I can continue to make decisions for them. And that's only $6,000 or $7,000 for each daughter. I haven't done that yet because I'm thinking, wow, that's a lot, so there must be another way to do it. So I'm getting counseled on that. And then I'm really trying to use my book. One of the ideas behind it, besides supporting others, is to find like-minded people that may have similar situations and to create an adult care home that's holistic and includes arts and crafts and movements and good food and all of those things. So my one daughter, Libby, is going to need care for the rest of her life. And I know there's tons of people out there that are practicing alternatives and that have challenging situations, either with children or with adults, and aren't able to be the sole provider. Like, for instance, you may not know it, but I am getting up there in my years.
No, like a child.
And, the physical body just isn't working like it used to. I do Bikram yoga, and I swear by Bikram yoga that it keeps me fit and strong. And I can still lift Libby because she's non-ambulatory, but will I be able to lift her next year? I don't know.
Well, the reason I asked you about the future is because you have a section in your book called Leaning into the Future.
Oh,
And you mentioned that somebody, one of your helpers, drove your car, and whenever he drove your car, he had the seat back in a very awkward position for you, but it turned out that if you sat there in the seat, your hands were on the steering wheel perfectly, the rear view mirror was adjusted perfectly, it was a very good position. And you said, I'm the one leaning forward in a hurry.
Yeah.
Because the seat was back. To get to the next place, I'm the one steering the car fast into the future before I'm ready.
Yeah.
And so I thought maybe you were going to answer in that kind of way. That, that you're leaning into the future. You're always raring to go.
Yeah.
And then you said, I don't need to adjust anything. Everything is just perfect right here in the middle. I don't need to lean forward to get to a better place for myself, my children, or anyone else.
Mm-hmm. Good one, yeah. And that's really how it is for me now. That my seat is back. My seat is back like that young guy who used to drive my car. I used to wonder, how can people actually drive like this, How can you, feel like you're in control, Because then I was like, how do I make all this work? How do I fix it? How do I get to the next healing remedy? And so really that was a big seeing for me, to see that I was leaning into the future and I could relax back. And then things started to really shift for me in a different way as far as this whole energy to fix and change. Definitely we want to do everything that we can to help the people we love, but there's a certain point of relaxation that has to happen before we drive ourselves and everybody else nuts. So now I relax back more, and there's a listening that has developed in me as far as, it's kind of like the serenity prayer. What is mine? What can I change? What can I change? What can I not change? How does it go? Something like that. And to know the difference between the two. Right? The wisdom to know the difference.
You've had because of the good, I would say the good karma you built up from the work you've done with your kids and with others, you have such a group of admirers and friends and supporters around you now that it seems like when I ask about your future, you can just rely on the grace of all your friends being there and carrying you right along their shoulders.
Well, I have some very good friends, but I don't know that I still have responsibility for my life as they do theirs, so I don't know that I can totally rely on that.
No,
but I certainly can feel supported.
When I'm seeing you, I look at you and I think, you went from just like flat on your back or flat on your rocker, to like now you're surfing. You're standing up and you've got a wave behind you that's carrying you along. And
well, it's definitely very different, and I'm even traveling a little bit now in Europe and other places with my book.
But I see this as an opening, like the surf's up, you're speeding ahead, that this thing's going to be a bomb. You're going to be speaking to thousands of people about this book. I feel lucky to have you on the air. Hang on, we got another caller.
Oh, I was actually hoping you could repeat, like if she had if the woman had a website or something.
Yes, okay. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Oh, yes, it's prajnaolivingawake.org. And Prajna is actually, the name that I go by, but what it means is wisdom, and that's something that's available to all of us. So it's wisdom living awake. And if you do want to get that book, because I'm still the kind of person that likes to have the book in my hands, you can get it at Briar Patch, Harmony Books, Grass Valley Bikram Yoga, Spiritual Life Center, and Tomes Bookstore, besides my website. It says, Edge of Grace is moving, uplifting, cleansing, surging power that makes you feel you'll never be the same again. As author Anne Lamott said, grace meets us where we are, but does not leave us where it found us. That's from a documentary producer from London.
Caller, you're live on the air with Prajna.
Hi. I have a question that maybe she can help me with. I'm 66 years old, and I have recurring migraines that won't go away. And I'm wondering if there's any way that I can find out through her work if there's something that I can do to get rid of these, other than just taking painkillers and more painkillers and more painkillers. And
yes. Well, I could definitely explore that with you and explore what you've already done. I mean, it would be more than just this phone call.
Right.
We could have a 15-minute free consultation on the phone.
I'd love to do that.
Yeah, and we can explore that because, as you know, with every medication that you take, it has side effects and it builds up toxins in the system.
Right.
So we can look and see what the source of the headaches are and teach you some things of listening to your body to see, what does it really want. It doesn't want the headache, right? But you have it for now. That's what you got, so.
Yeah, that's what I got.
Yeah, so we could definitely look at that. I'd love to chat with you about that.
Okay, so how do I do this?
Go to my website, prajnaolivingawake.org, and send me a request.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. And what's your name?
Samaya.
Okay, I'll look for you.
Okay, thank you.
William Osler, the father of modern medicine, said that marijuana was the sovereign remedy for migraine headaches. And the news from Capitol Hill, this is a totally different topic, because there are two bills in front of Congress right now to legalize marijuana, completely legalize it in the country. So that meme, that thought in society is rapidly evolving, that I think it will be decriminalized within the next year or two, and people with migraine headaches will probably be the first people in line.
Interesting, yeah.
For medical help.
That I don't know anything about.
Not that I'm recommending, I'm just saying I read it. And
that's not my avenue, but I know that it works for people.
I don't know about headaches, but I'm just saying that's one of the first things I remember reading when I first started medical school. And you quoted the gospel according to Thomas at the end of your book. And that's one of my favorites. So one of my favorite expressions is life is a motion and a rest. And so I was wondering if you could read us, because I find myself not reading well sometime when I'm doing this.
You want me to? Yeah, so this is at the end of the book, and it's from a section called There Are No Conclusions. Our conclusions are fixations that keep us in the past and blind us to unlimited possibilities. Suffering is derived from our resistance to what is. I clearly experience the difference between pain and suffering. Pain is an unavoidable consequence of being alive and in direct relationship to every dimension of life, including the full array of feelings. Suffering is solidifying our viewpoint with belief, which demands this should or should not have happened. When we believe that our viewpoint or our story is the final truth, we suffer. We suppress the impact of life and the opportunity for the situation to teach us profound truths and expand our hearts. Life is meant to have an impact on us. When the road gets bumpy and life shakes us, it is an opportunity to experience our humanness and develop our capacities. Our capacity to meet pain and difficulty widens our capacity to feel love and compassion. We may not always like the curves in the road or the outcome, but when we argue with life, when we turn right and life says turn left, we lose every time. My final conclusion is that there are no conclusions. This awareness is what keeps us from falling into a bitter slumber. This awareness is what keeps us from turning our light off and unenlightening ourselves. Life turns us around because life is truly only moving in one direction, and that direction is freedom. Adyashanti pointed out a significant insight years ago that came from a teaching in the Bible. It's the story of Jesus coming upon a group of people who were stoning a woman for a behavior they didn't agree with. Jesus said, "Let he who is without sin cast the first stone." This story shows that Jesus, holding himself as an equal to everyone else, not beyond or below such people or behaviors. He is saying that nobody is without sin. He describes sin as missing the mark or living from a place of confusion. I find this message genuinely refreshing as well as startling, because from a true place of wholeness, we are everything and everyone. Otherwise, we are holding ourselves as separate, as superior or inferior. Everyone has done something that they wish they had done differently. Most people, at one time or another, feel remorse and wish they could turn back the wheel of time and do life over again. This perception comes from a conditioned sense of separation. When we see deeply that we are life, when we release our past, let go of our concern for the future, and let life be exactly as it is, we are born fresh each moment. A sense of serene equanimity develops. The gap between our deepest realization and our human expression gets smaller and smaller. We are living awake in a constant flow with the unknown mystery that we are. And then here's a little section called Movement and Repose. Jesus once said to Thomas, "If they ask you, 'Where are you from?' say, 'We are born of light.' If they ask you, who are you? Say, 'We are light, the living one.' If they ask you, 'What is the sign of living light?' say, 'It is movement and repose.'" Awakening to yourself as spirit is to look to the depths of your being to see that what you are is light. You are born of light. This light is not given to you from an external source. You are the source. You have always been the source. You are what you've been seeking. You have always been light. Light is your birthplace. We are light. Everything is light. There is no other. Everything is you. Everyone is you. One living you, living me, living everyone. Light is always moving in the direction of that which does not yet know it is light. Light that knows it is light has no fear of that which does not know it is light. Light does not perceive darkness, delusion, confusion, dream, or story as separate from light. Light sees that everyone is an expression of light, equal to itself, undivided, and whole. Our light is always shining, moving, and being itself. Be a light unto yourself. Don't let it shine as if there is another. There is no other. Everything is you. Everything and everyone is forever being and moving, to no other. The truth of our light is not able to rest until it has enlightened itself from its shadow of misunderstanding, fascination, addiction, contradiction, and all forms of illusion. Light is the greatest love and compassion, steadily moving to itself. It is the light that shines upon every aspect of light and is strengthened through our stillness, our repose. It is the light that is not afraid to question our answers, our assumptions, our thoughts, and those that are handed to us from others. Stillness is the practice of reposing as the light that you are. Movement is questioning. Is it true? Who says so? How do I know it is true? And not stopping until you arrive at a satisfaction that only you know is true, with the full power of your heart, your wisdom, your presence, your being, your light.
Wonderful, just wonderful. I always like that thought that there's no darkness that can withstand a candle. There's no darkness that can stand up to the smallest candle.
Yes.
Thanks again for being on the show, Prajna.
Thanks so much for having me, Haines.